Give this a moment just to make sure that the zoom doesn't kick in on me. This is 1714 case of the Catalans. You want the good news or the bad news? How about the bad news? This is in no way enough of a military simulation to be a war game. That's not necessarily bad for anyone's view. But if you're looking at it thinking, wow, a mixed war game, political game, yeah, no, it isn't. It abstracts the military way too much. Two, it is not a sufficient simulation of, now we check again, of the events to qualify as anything other than a pure Euro. It's got an interesting topical background. It's got a decent amount of detail, like it's trying to be a simulation of some sort of the political underlying results, but it's not. It really... That generally gets a game very deeply on my bad side, but this one had enough time to trick me into thinking, hey, maybe it is kind of simulating stuff that didn't bother me too much. Well, until later, once I started to realize, yeah, it's not simulating anything. The third really bad thing about it is the rules, as Charles Vassy puts it, you're going to say they're too short, and they are. They don't cover anywhere near enough. But also, some of the cards aren't clarified enough. Like I said in one of the videos, I think somewhere around a quarter of the cards are going to need specific questions relating to them. Although some of those questions may be able to generally cover, 4 or 5 cards in a hit. But there's some concepts that one feels maybe the language was used in a way that's not consistent between the different cards. And because it's not a simulation, because it's not really representative of the situations, it's very hard to try to judge what the designer meant. On the other hand, getting them wrong may not matter that much. I got things wrong in my playthrough, some pretty severely wrong, and I don't know that it hurt the game itself. So what's the good news? The good news is it's a really interesting Euro in terms of a mixture of design elements that come from disparate segments of the hobby. So you've got a very CDG-like card situation, except that they're not in your hand. Those CDG-like cards are being attributed to the different players through a role selection type of mechanism. And there's actually multiple layers of the role selection because you have this action selection within the cards. But the cards help determine who gets what pick, and then who gets the pick of the next turn's cards as well. So there's a lot of thinking about the mechanisms. And I actually found it was a really interesting game for the first half. In terms of what you had to do to try to understand how all the pieces fit together and to try to optimize, your position throughout the game. There do seem to be some dominating choices, though, in it. For example, it is almost always best to pick the top card. If you can't get the top card, you want to get one of the top cards. You want to stay so that you're continuously rotating your turn order so that you're always getting to pick the next turn's card quickly. And the same thing goes with, to tell you the truth, to some extent, the concessions, although they can shake things up because you have this hidden victory condition thing. And if you can get the right concession to match your victory condition, you want to do that because you can recover from falling behind in the turn order. It will be hard to catch up to players who score their concessions well, unless you're able to shake up the concession holding itself. In the game that I played, board presence ended up not being too important at the end of the game because people had a significant ability to hammer each other's board presence. On the other hand, maybe they weren't concentrating enough on defending their board presence and were trying to spread out too much and grab too many points. So there's, tactical considerations that I think I played poorly in on that side. Anyway, the game's mechanisms work together in an intriguing way that makes this, to me, a really interesting Euro. And on top of that, it's got this strong negotiation element and a fairly decent ability to hit other players with effects. Although they may not be devastating effects, because usually you can't touch, although you can peek at sometimes, their hidden objectives. You seldom can affect their concessions, which is where the majority of their points sit. But you can really hammer their board presence. And maybe if people are playing a little bit more defensively, everybody's board presence won't decrease to nothing, but only the people who are in the lead will. I'm not so sure about that. A negative to it as a Euro, though, is those hidden victory point objectives. There's a decent amount of luck in how capable you are of being able to obtain the ones you have and hold the ones you have. Negotiation skills may well come in more than in a solo play in terms of, determining how much you can deflect attention as being in the lead, how much you can get your way, but it's hard because you don't know what the other guy wants. When you go into a negotiation, it's nice to have a lot of cards on the table, but in general, you'll be talking about, well, I got Mantua, it's worth 3 points. I could give you that for Gibraltar, or for Naples that's worth 3 points, and I'd like to do that, and you've just revealed something that you're interested in. Now the other guy could be like, well, that's not really valuable to me. How about you throw $4 in? Well, now I know you're probably lying to me because you wouldn't make that trade otherwise, that you don't have the objective that I'm offering you. Or that you're trying to sleaze, maybe you're just dumb. Maybe that's the issue. But I don't want to make that deal with you where I'm giving you the points just because I've kind of revealed first what my objective is. However, if you know what my objective is from looking at a card, you can make the proposal more easily. By making the proposal, you're essentially revealing something. If the money's high enough, it could be reasonable, but then I could be sandbagging with my money request. Like if I'm asking for $8 from you, and we make the exchange because it doesn't hurt me, I could be sandbagging you and actually have the objective that you're offering to trade to me. In which case, I'm walking away like a bandit. I'm getting a big boatload of money and the card I wanted just because you revealed something ahead of time. So I could see where people aren't really comfortable with making trades because of that hidden information aspect of it and how important it is to get the right objectives. Still, I find it very intriguing the way it meshes together, that role selection, the CDG element. There was another element that it pulled in that I mentioned somewhere, but it's much less important, in the negotiation, obviously. It's much less important to the game overall. But as I said, as a simulation, it just completely fails. It is not representing anything. The initial board state represents the situation to some extent, fairly well, but once you move from that, the ability to move, wherever you want, basically, the random, the cards taking effect basically based on who plays them, where they take effect, what they do. It's all just so. You see situations where the Flemish line is no longer in existence for one side or the other, and nothing really comes of that. The game that I played, the Netherlands should have been overrun by France, from what I could see from the board situation. But as far as I can tell, according to the rules as interpreted by the designer, in a comment left to a question on Board Game Geek, the French actually can't invade anyone, and they just it leaves you with really a difficult place, because the rules, and most specifically some of the effects on the cards, aren't really well described. So you're left without being able to logically reason about it, because the game has no real logical reason behind it. It is an exercise in gameplay. Now, you can probably get by fine with any decision you make, as long as you make it. But that decision probably has to be made and agreed upon beforehand, which means at some point or another somebody's going to have to go through and write up a fact sheet on all the cards that have any possible issues and everything else. Right now the errata is pretty small. I don't know if the Spanish language version was it Spanish or was it in Catalan? Yeah, that would be Spanish, sort of. Not talking Basque here. There's two language groups in Spain, but they've mutated, they've kind of melded together, and Portugal's the remains of one, and Spain's the remain of the others. I'm sure there's dialects. But anyway, I don't know if the Spanish language rules were better. But these, it doesn't give the feeling of lost in the translation the way sometimes EU rules do, although if you read the French rules ever, you realize those weren't very good either. So, you just got to kind of say, well, is the game worth that? Or do we wait until there's, a rewrite of the rules? It was probably pretty hard to get the rules released in English to begin with. The game released in English. For me, I'm still kind of happy about the game. It has those negatives. It isn't what I had kind of hoped for when I broke it out, but it kind of tricked me into liking it a lot, in terms of just the way the mechanisms interact, and in terms of the historical background, even if it doesn't really, link in to the topic well. So I'm happy I have it. It's something I would like to bring to play with other people, but I kind of have trouble bringing something to play with other people when it's got this many rules issues. So I'll probably wait and not play it opposed with anyone except maybe my wife. And it really is a 5-player game. I wouldn't play it in 2. There's rules for 2, but I wouldn't suggest that. In general, they look like they're going to cause problems. I would say you want 5, maybe 4. And it would be really hard for me to bring this to, say, a gaming group and say, well, we're going to have to kind of make up what the cards mean as we go on. So, I have a lot more tolerance for that with a war game. Especially a really complex one like the Azure Wish stuff, than I do for something like this. But it shows some promise. Maybe they'll clear up the issues. Maybe a fact sheet will come out that covers all the questions as it hits a more, again, some of the issues might be the English wording, and more likely, though, it maybe just the Board Game Geek and the online gaming community is more active in English, so there may be more demand, even if it's still a small print run, towards getting answers with the English language version out there as well. Neat game though. Neat game.